Welcome to the Expert Network Team podcast,
where our goal is to inform and educate listeners on matters of finance, legal, insurance, and other interests that are of personal and business nature.
We hope you enjoy the information contained in today's podcast and find it useful.
We'd like to introduce your Expert Network team of professionals.
I'm Carl Frank, owner and financial planner at A&I Wealth Management. I work with clients to help them grow and protect their investments and choose how they want to be taxed.
I'm Jeff Krommendyk, a managing principal of One Digital Insurance. I work with individuals and businesses to help them understand their risk exposure and lead them to risk transfer solutions that best fit their needs.
I'm Nathan Merrill, founder and attorney at Goodspeed Merrill, providing advanced tax strategy and private client legal services to affluent families and entrepreneurs.
Together, our independent team combines our expertise to provide you insights and solutions, some straightforward, some profound, addressing real-life opportunities we see on a daily basis.
If you'd like to learn more or desire to meet with any of the Expert Network team professionals in person, you can contact us at info@expertnetworkteam.com. That's info@expertnetworkteam.com.
We encourage you to take advantage of a free consultation with any of our professionals. Just mention this podcast when you schedule your appointment.
Without further delay, please enjoy today's podcast.
All right, welcome back. Today's podcast, we are continuing with our guest, Roey Diefendorf, and I'm again here with Jeff Krommendyk of One Digital Insurance. I'm Nathan Merrill of Goodspeed Merrill. I may have forgot to mention that last time, but I'm on every episode, so if people don't know me by now, then that's unfortunate. But I want to pick up where we left off a little bit with you, Roey. As we mentioned last time, as we talked about last time, you have unique perspective on family generational wealth planning, in that your family has now gone into its fifth generation. We want to talk a little bit about some of the journey beyond 3D portfolio theory into the FamTech platform that you've been working on, and then talk specifically about, maybe the FamTech platform is part of this, talking about the things that a family who wants to engage in this, you call it preparing the family for the money, the things that need to be done or that you're doing with your platform that promote that. But first, getting back to maybe a quick history, you can recap for our listeners so they don't have to go back to the last episode, the quick history of your family succession. And then you mentioned right as we closed the last episode that transferring to the fifth generation was the hardest challenge perhaps that your family's faced. Why don't you kick us off there?
All right. So starting back in 1875, my great-grandfather began in the insurance business and was a very successful insurance business. In fact, his clients were a who's who. Many of the old businesses in New York that are still around were clients of
kind of household names.
Household names, yeah. And he was in Brooklyn. In fact, when you cross the Brooklyn Bridge, when they opened the Brooklyn Bridge, walking from Manhattan to Brooklyn, there was a big sign that says "Diefendorf welcomes you to Brooklyn, America." That was his address. All you had to do was write to Warren T. Diefendorf, Brooklyn, America, and he'd get it. Now there was no electricity, there were no telephones, so everything was, you had to call, you had to walk in and make calls. So all of those businesses in the Brooklyn area were all clients of theirs, right? And so they were door-to-door salesmen, if you will.
Right.
But he grew it. In fact, he was a good friend of Teddy Roosevelt's, and they would ride together in the cavalry and on and on. So you can, There's a whole history there. My grandfather was, again, a student of the business and came along, ultra successful, died very prematurely. And generation after my dad finished the war, he came in, and this again was the insurance business, in which I started in 1970 as well. But I knew I came in with a heritage with the name Diefendorf. And I had that as a a motivator to some degree, but also it was a real fear and a real pressure on me. And I wanted it to go. I didn't want to be the one that was going to drop the ball and be the one that disappointed everyone, because I was proud of what all of the, I wanted to be worthy of my heritage.
We talked prior to this podcast, we have talked amongst ourselves a lot about that 3-generation problem. So you're a 4th generation, you're kind of a prove it generation as to your family. So I can understand the pressure that might've been on you, because that's usually when, by historical measures, that's when families start collapsing.
Yeah, no, I know that. And it would have been, if I didn't have maybe the drive or I think it was probably more about the family focus, because I wanted this to be, I wanted to improve or extend the family impact.
Sure.
I mean, we had tremendous impact. I mean, if you take, at the time, the largest life insurance company in America, we were the single most valuable resource to that insurance company. We had more insurance on the books as a family. We had more impact than anyone. And I go, you know what we're doing is a good thing, and I'd like to perpetuate it. Now, I did more from there, and I did say, okay, how do I then expand? Because from the time when my great-grandfather started, I mentioned life expectancy was 47. But when my father was starting, it was 67, right? And people would retire at 65 and they'd live 2 years. And so you didn't have to worry about too much retirement planning. Now, it's probably 87. And if people retire at 65, they got to plan for another 20 something years. And so the focus changed. And so now it's about asset protection and retirement and making sure that you're keeping together what you put together. So the change is made. In fact, the next generation will probably be, when they do the life expectancy tables, it'll probably be 107. But that's the kind of thing we look. So here I was under this pressure. I'll tell you why going to the next generation was so difficult.
Right.
So I had 4 daughters, right? So, and as I went along, I mean, probably the best recruiters for me were my daughters, because the son-in-laws that I have, 2 of which came into the business, spectacular guys, but didn't have the name Diefendorf. And I realized that at some point in time, I'd be gone. They'd be running the business, and they'd say, Diefendorf, that doesn't really mean anything. And somebody would say, well, let's get rid of it. Another guy would say, well, we can't get rid of it. And there would be this, hypothetically saying there's going to be some kind of big hullabaloo discussion. I go, I'm going to get rid of it. I'm going to kill the name while I still have the chance. So no one has to make that decision. And I said, in fact, what we're doing is bigger than Diefendorf. I really believe that, I didn't want the people that work for us in all these different entities, I didn't want them to think that they were working hard to make money for the Diefendorfs. It was more about, how do we help these families? So in 2014, I took the name Diefendorf out of the business, and I changed it to 3-dimensional wealth, because I didn't want it to be about the person, the family. I wanted it to be about what we're doing in total wealth management, not be focused just on financial. Now, you think that would be easy. My daughter said, Dad, you can't do that. I said, well, sure I can. No, you can't. That's the family name. And I go, I can do it. Well, I happened to do it on my birthday. That's how I remember. And February 7th, I got up, and it was like someone had died. Very interesting. And it was just a name change. Everything, the people were saying, paychecks were there, nothing changed. Everybody's doing the same thing, but it was like somebody died. Now, 24 hours later, I was over it, and I moved on, and there we go. Now, take it ahead to the point where I said, okay, I'm going to follow my dad's footsteps, and I'm going to put a marker in, and I said, this is the day I'm stepping aside. Because even with my dad, very interesting. So he gave me 7 years. We had 7 years to the day he retired, but there was a lingering. The office manager that we had, he was with us 39 years. I think he was 16 years with Dad and the remainder of the time with me. And after my dad had retired, he would go, Ro, your dad wouldn't do it that way. I go, he's not here. I'm running the place. Well,
The ghost.
That went on for almost 5 years until I got out from under this. I said the ghost that lingered around.
Yeah.
And it wasn't that he always was the one, even though he was called the legend. I go, if he's the legend, I must be the shadow. He always kind of pushed me out on the stage and always stepped back, was very good about that. And yet I understood that there was this aura, this presence that continues. So I go, okay, now it was 2014. I changed the name, and I know I'm going to the point in time where I'm now going to come up with a succession management. Okay. So I put the plan together, and it took me a little longer than 7 years. I mean, it became much more complex. I mean, at that point, I'm running an RIA. I've got my own broker dealer. I have my own trust company. We're doing tax preparation. We're really running a multifamily office and all of these pieces. And so I'm trying to land them all and get them set so the day I walk out, it's clean. Okay. So now I'm approaching the time. And when I say it was tough is I loved every day, Nate, that I did this. I loved the people. I loved my clients. And I really didn't want to go. Right. And I can see why people in the business and businesses, they go, well, I love it, so I might as well stick around and I can bring some value to it. And yet I think they're doing more harm than good. And I knew it. And I said, okay, I got to make a decision. And so I was packing up my stuff. And the ultimate decision was I had in my office, I had a fireplace, and it was an old historic building, and I have a big red leather desk and a big red leather chair, and it looked like the king here. And so and I knew that if I left it there, the day after not only would my ghost be there, I go, well, let me just go back to, I'd go back and I'd sit in my chair and I would never leave. So it was the surrender part that was the toughest part. And I told the guys I sold the building, and I told the guys that were at the dumpster, I called these guys, I said, you see that desk over there? I said, I want you to do me a big favor. I want you to take it outside. I want you to chop it up, throw it in the dumpster. See the chair I'm sitting in right now? I want you to take it out, throw it in the dumpster. I said, I'm not coming back. June 30th, 2020, I walked out. I have not been back one day. Now, if changing the name in 2014, you thought somebody died, in 2020, June 30th, it was a death. And it was the most difficult thing that I had to go through. And not just that day, it was the preparation, knowing that I was terminally ill, right? And this eventual was going to happen. What saved me is I didn't retire from something. I retired to something. Mm-hmm. I had already had in my mindset, I thought, okay, I still have a little bit of fuel in the tank, and I don't want to come back and haunt this place. And I don't want to get in the way and micromanage. So I'll walk out, and if they screw up, the fifth generation blows the thing up, that's it. I did my part. I passed the baton. Everything was in good order. Now it's not mine, and I don't have to worry about it. But what I wanted to do is make sure that I had something to retire to. And in fact, I think, Nate, what I'm doing now, it took me 50 years of preparation to get to the point of what I'm doing now with helping to prepare the heirs rather than just preparing the money. Right. And I think I'm having a much more significant impact now, and my best days are ahead. In fact, not behind. And if I didn't have that, I would be, I'd be hurting.
Well, and you say that, if the fifth generation blows it, then that's on them. But I suspect you've been putting into practice with your own family some of the things you work on with others.
I eat my own cooking.
Yeah. So let's talk about the technology that you helped or that you were part of developing, the More Than Money platform, and what things you actually do with families like your own that help make sure that if we get to a fifth or a sixth or a seventh generation, that the preparations are in place to give us the highest probability of success for that transfer.
Yeah, we're moving in. We'll have next year will be our 17th year having a family meeting, right? And what's interesting is when I started, none of my girls were married, right? And so the process really continues on because they weren't married. Then they got the outlaws that come in, and so now you've got to quote indoctrinate them or let them understand how we do business or how we operate or what is it that brings us together, because they're all bringing their family traditions. In fact, most of them had no family traditions. In fact, 3 of the 4 had homes that were broken, and so it was a different structure, and they had to understand that this is who we are, and this is what our mission is as a family and what we want to try and accomplish. So now it's indoctrinating. Now, my oldest grandson is 15. Well, at 14, they get a seat at the family foundation. Now, I want to start doing that. So it continues to go, and I've got 14 grandchildren. So it's going to be, as long as I'm alive, right? It's going to be, I forget, another 10 years. Okay. I'll be 27 years of working on family meetings, preparing them. And when I'm gone, life goes on. The same thing goes on. The mechanism is there. The funding is there. The technology and how to aggregate it. And now we just have more people coming on board. And as the grandchildren come on board, we're starting to have their data put in. We're finding out about their social styles. We're finding out about their appreciation styles. And we're finding out about their learning styles. And we're finding about, what philanthropic things that they're of interest. And so as all that comes in, we want to hear from the rising generation. And that's the thing that I found is that a lot of these rising generations said, this is the first time anyone has asked us. Everything's been, they tell us, oh, we did these trusts, we did this stuff, this is it, it's all top down, and this is good for you, and you gotta eat it. And they weren't in the kitchen helping, right? So we're getting them involved for the first time. They go, yeah, now we start to get the idea, and this building transparency and building trust, and that's what the technology platform really helps us do, is to have every individual have the ability to have their voice heard or seen, and they get that in, and then the software aggregates the data and says, oh, collectively, right? So if we're talking about values and the value steps, well, there's 154 values. If I say to, Jeff, I say, well, tell me, what are your values? You go, I don't know. So what we do is we help to synthesize and bring them down and get this thing so that it comes down to the big 6. What are the big 6? And of those big 6, whether they're, philanthropic, spiritual, education, career, of those, what's dad's, values and mom's and everybody else's, and then collectively as the family, what's the impact that we can have, right? That's what we're trying to do. Unless I know that. Now, if I'm working on values-based trusts, if I can get them to help give that input, what kind of buy-in do I get or understanding of the trust? So that way, when distributions are made based on values, not because they're 35 years old and blah, they dump the vibe and dissipate the stuff. That doesn't make any sense. So we're using this kind of tool in order to achieve the things that I was the problem, right? I was trying to get the data and I was putting it together and I was working like a nut, and I go, this is not it. And so I said, I will dedicate the next part of the last phase of my life. I used to say, I was on the back 9, and I say, okay, I'm on the back 9. Now I'm like on the 18th hole and I'm putting. And so I'm running out of time, but I've dedicated this season to say, how can I help put this together so that way the younger generations, guys like you, Nate, Jeff, the younger generations can take the tool and bring it out to the families that they have, the clients that they have, and say, hey, this is how we're going to be able to incorporate, your money and your more than money wealth management together. When you do that, I think now you've got a real solid plan. And, it's a working process. It will never stop. With technology, it's just a monster that you got to keep feeding. But the outcome and the output and what I hear from the families that we're dealing with is just, that's what keeps me going, right?
Well, like you say, expanding the reach. And there's a reason why I know I like hanging out with Roey is I'm a younger generation when Roey's talking.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I like hanging out with, yeah, guys older than me.
Yeah. So, so tell me about some of the, if you can, whether anecdotally from your own situation or how you approach it with families. What do these family meetings entail? What, help our listeners understand when you say having these annual family meetings, or what's going on in the family unit to prepare for that, to execute at the meeting. What's the follow-up? How does that all work?
All right, so let's take one of the exercises that's we talk about impact investing. So what we find is like the rising generation is they're not just interested in the the return on the investment, but are we doing any good? The double bottom line, if you will, or triple bottom line. Can we make an impact? It's not enough to get 35% rate of return on my pornography fund. I might rather get 5% return on a clean water fund or something like that. And so there's a value to that, right? So we do an assessment that aligns with the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals of the UN. So there are 16 of these that they put together. It was, I think, 119 countries around the world, and said, hey, what are the big rocks that we want to move? And can we get, foundations, nations, families that can allocate resources towards these things? All right. So in a family meeting, we're going to say, your family has financial resources and we've got investments. Can we hear from you? And so we do assessments, and each of them, and then to aggregate, we might say, your family has spoken, and it looks like the top 4 things that are of interest. You might be a SDG 4, 7, 12, and 13. Right. And so then you go look at the chart, and 4 is quality education. I don't know what 17, 12, and 13 are, but sure. But it'll identify those for them and say, okay, knowing that information, how can you work with your, wealth manager, your financial advisor, and able to map your investments to your things that are of value to you that you want to make an impact. And so we'll talk about those things at a family meeting. Philanthropy becomes a real important part of the families that we're dealing with. So we work on like a philanthropic roadmap. Philanthropic roadmap, we'll hear from everybody and says, well, how do you, as your roadmap, how do you want to do this thing? Do you want to do it locally, nationally, globally? Do you want to be a relief organization? Or do you want to be one that's, building and having, having the people that we're working with or we're helping to help create the solutions themselves, right? And so we've got a number of things that go through, and then collectively it says, okay, here's how it stacks up in the family. So you'll compare and contrast. And currently we've got about 35 different assessments on the drawing board. We've got 90.
Wow.
Right. But it takes time. And so I'm realistic. I just look and say, okay, which ones? But things like you want to really have a family that works together. I would say probably one of the most important things is learn how to be a family that's forgiving. So we have an assessment that goes through and says, well, how are we doing?
Right.
Doing as an individual, and how are we doing as a family? And let's have at our family meeting, this is what we're going to concentrate on, or have one of the elements to say, how can we improve on that? Or at least have it, rise. Otherwise, if you're not even cognizant that it exists, right? It's a blind spot. You don't see it. Right? We're trying to elevate those things. Same thing with, appreciation. How do you want to be appreciated? Is it the type of person that you're a physical kind of touch guy? You want the hug, but it's all research based. These are all out of some university or some research thing. And so the research that we do, we'll get the permission to use assessments. We'll even we have strength finders in, Gallup strength finders in it. And so we've got certified strength finders coach that deals with the families, because we know that if we can help a family identify, there's 34 of them, but let's take the top 5 strengths. If someone in the individual in the family can work on their strengths, not the things they say, well, maybe we can find out what you're not good at and let's work on getting those better. No, let's find out what you're good at and let's spend your time doing that. What we find out is you're much happier working on the things that you're good at and you're 6 times more productive. Okay, so can we identify? So we do that. Now, what we want to know is, in a family, if we're all the same thing, then somebody's superfluous. We don't need you. We want to know where we fill in the gaps. And as we start to build in the governance, right? So now you've got the governance structure. It's like, just because you're in the family, right? You're on the bus, but what are the seats on the bus? Who's going to be the one that's the, maybe it's the historian, family historian.
Right.
Maybe it's the curator. Maybe it's the, independent trustee or the president of the family foundation or the philanthropist, figuring out the venues for the family forums. But you're identifying what those are. And now let's find out from assessments how we can fill with the right people in the right seat.
Right.
As opposed to just saying, well, he's the oldest in the family, so I guess we got to make him the president.
Yeah, I mean, that's actually something I wanted to point out, that in terms of my awareness of your process and the system you put in place, is it really flattens out the family. It takes a little bit of that hierarchical predominance that might exist in a family and makes everybody a participant almost at the same level. Is that a fair evaluation of kind of what you got going on?
There's always going to be the alpha guy in there.
Sure.
And someone's going to become a natural leader. But what it is it helps you agree to disagree on some things. And it helps you when you finally, as a family, make a decision to say, well, here's why this individual is in that position. People in the family go, oh, we get it. There's a methodology. We all understand that we've been through this. And you know what? Honestly, I'm not the right person for that job, but my cousin Phil is. Okay, we got that. And that's what we want to try to do is have the conversation where we build trust, we build transparency. And it takes the way to do it is time together. You want to know the single most thing that you can do for a family in order to build strong family roots in the family tree, build traditions. Number one thing.
Huh.
And when you take somebody, so you think about Thanksgiving, are we having the cream onions again? Oh my gosh, right? Everybody complains. Next year, take the cream onions out. What? No creamed onions? We always have creamed onions, right? And so you build these traditions into whatever they are, right? That's the things that's helping to build the roots, right? Roots and wings. You want to help roots, but then you want to be able to help push them out of the nest and get them fly. So it's that give and take. You want to try to, let the butterfly out of the cocoon, but part of the struggle of the butterfly getting out of the cocoon is strengthening its wings.
Yeah.
You make it too easy, boom, you're done.
And I think it was James Hughes in one of his books talks about that study that happened sometime before 9/11, where I think it was a Harvard longitudinal study where they found that children who understand even their parents' meeting and how their parents came together and their marriage and that sort of stuff withstood emotional strains better than kids who didn't have that basic understanding of where they came from. Now you magnify that by a generational understanding of where you come from. And he took that study through 9/11. I think they they carried that research forward and re-interviewed some of those kids after 9/11 and found that it held true that those who had a better understanding of their roots withstood the emotional strains and trauma that 9/11 presented to them as a generation. And that's kind of what you're saying in terms of traditions, is understanding or having some foundation, both in terms of your understanding your roots and the traditions and baseline that you inherit, helps you be a stronger person going forward, which gives you the ability to launch and spread your wings.
We give them the opportunity in that software in order to put in the impact experiences within the lives. So here they are. What happens is most of these kids, they're wealthy. They wake up, they're on third base, and they think they hit a triple.
Yeah.
Oh, you know what? So what we're trying to do is have the generations in terms of preparing to say, listen, you want me to tell you how you got to third base? Do you know there were days that we didn't know how we were going to pay our mortgage? There were days that we didn't eat. And when you start to hear the struggles that someone went through, when they're standing on third base, they get a different kind of appreciation. Like, hey, I know I can. If my dad or my grandfather got through it, and when we're doing these family meetings, the generational piece, because I can tell you that the older generation, the next thing they feel is marginalized, but they feel like they're losing their impact, right?
Right.
And so what we're doing is trying to have that senior generation connect with young ones. In fact, we have more of an impact, I believe, with our grandchildren, right, than some of our children have with their own children. So we want to be able to pass on. So my job is, instead of going out and taking a couple of my buddies out to play golf yesterday, I'm out with a couple of my grandsons, right? And I'd rather have that in. I don't have many years I have left to try to make that connection and build those times together. But as we're doing it, I'm telling the stories. And we've got, in our impact experience, a catalog of, years. I just finished, we had my grandmother, 90 years old, 30 years ago, every night for 5 nights, tell another 20 years of her life, right? All those videos, they're sitting on our dashboard right here. You want to get them? Anyone in our family? 106 letters from my father to his grandchildren. There. Talk about impact. You talk about the wealth that's in there. So how are you going to capture that, protect it? When we talk about having a family mission statement, where they reside? Right here. People can look at it. If you can't articulate a family mission statement in, and find it in less than 5 minutes, I mean, these families that we have, it'll take them 10 seconds.
Right.
Yeah.
And that we want to continue to make sure that these elements that are going to make the difference, because as you know, everyone's going to have potholes that they're going to go through. They're going to have trouble, and there's going to be white water. We got to figure out how to get around it. And if we can, that's what my father said. Oh, I think I might have sent this to you, Nate. We had put together a manuscript that my mom and dad put together. It was called Personal Wealth, right? It was really the tapestry of their lives. And what they did is they came up with 21 of life's lessons, right? One of them I remember. There's power in prayer. They tell a story. Another one is love people, use things, not vice versa, right? And they tell a story. When you get that all done, I mean, the wealth that's in that document,
yep,
more than anything I inherited financially from them, right? And so how do we then be able to pass that on and have that going? So it's a real privilege to be able to share that. And yet what's happening is it's counterculture, because all of the financial institutions of the world, what they tell their associates is, you want to be successful? More assets under management. You want your families to be happier? Grow their assets under management. That's the answer. And I'm going, that's not the answer. That's not the answer. It's part of it. But you know what? If you don't take all of this, the totality of the wealth, and put it together, in my mind, you're not a very good advisor. I hate to blanket statement. There are plenty of
that's what we
you know what I'm saying.
You
really can't do the full job.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that's why
I'm biased, so you got to take it with a grain of salt.
Well, no, that's why we spend so much time on this topic lately, and it's not apparent that you have a passion for this, Roey. I mean, you could have fooled me, but that's a little facetious there.
This has been awesome, really has.
Do you have any questions, Jeff?
I would just, as we're running tight on time, we want to kind of land the plane here. Love to know, Roey, how can our listeners tap into your information and even access this app or this software that you have? What does this look like? Is it only available through advisors, or do you make it available to the public?
No, it's available to advisors for their clients. The website is morethanmoney360.com. It'll talk about family meetings and what can be accomplished. But it's like anybody can join the gym, except I can tell you that the people that don't have a trainer and are at the gym aren't half as successful than those that go to the gym and have a trainer, right? And so the program is, okay, you got barbells and you know how to lift them and something else. It's having the advisor who helps to facilitate and understands and can help to move them along. Yeah. So we're trying to help the advisors change their mindset. And I say, when you have financial institutions that are saying, your wealth is your value as an advisor to us is more assets. And I go, that may be great, but who are you working for? Are you working for the financial institution, or are you working for the family?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that you can live in a world where both of those can be objective, but don't get sidetracked. But that's it. So I'm really bucking the trend. Years back, TD Ameritrade had a conference. It was a technology conference. They said, we're going to give $100,000 prize to the person that comes up with the most valuable technology for advisors. I said, you know what? I'm going to submit. You had to put a 3-minute video in. So I submitted a 3-minute video, but I said, I'm not going in on a fintech, right? Everybody's got fintech. I said, I'm going in on a famtech. How do you help the family? And I said, there's one of two things. Either I'm going to win this thing because, it's like, who are our choices? A, B, C, D, and purple. I'm so out of the pot, right? And so I'm either going to win it because I'm different, or they're going to go, this guy's a lunatic. P.S. I didn't win. So they just kind of, I think, threw me off and said, you know what, that's out of our scope of doing business. But someday, I think the things that I'm talking about that are out, beyond the horizon, I see it. I've been out 50 years and I'm out 50 miles, and I see the horizon that's completely different than those are close to the shore, and all they can see is what they've already got. And I'm going, it's different. A generation from now, when you guys are, my age, what we're talking about is going to be mainstream, not, out there.
Yeah.
Good.
That's a great way, I think, to end this conversation. It's been fascinating, invigorating talking with you, Roey. Wish we had about a few more hours to pull this off, but we'll leave it
there. Get me started.
I
could go another 2 hours. I'll stop right there, Nate.
Yeah.
Great.
Thank you. Thank you for your time, and to our listeners, hope you've enjoyed hearing this discussion and participating with us. And with that, we'll call it a wrap and make it a beautiful day.
Well, you're doing a great job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Roey. Appreciate it.
Okay. Ciao.
Thank you for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed the discussion and the information we shared.
We hope you enjoy the information contained in today's podcast and find it useful.
We hope you will join us again next time as we explore new areas of interest to our listeners or current issues we believe are important to discuss.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe so you are notified when future episodes are released, and also share it with a friend that you think would benefit.
If you'd like to meet with a member of the Expert Network team or have a request for a special topic you'd like to have us discuss on the podcast, submit those requests to info@expertnetworkteam.com. That's info@expertnetworkteam.com.
Thank you for joining us and have a great day.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. We want to remind you that listening to this podcast does not establish a client-professional relationship with any of the professional firms represented, including guests, nor does it constitute legal, investment, accounting, or other advice of a fiduciary nature. The views expressed are those of the professionals only.
Investment advisor services may be provided through A&I Wealth Management. Securities may be provided through Genios Wealth Management.